Hello and welcome everyone to today's episode of the Kianistan podcast. We've had a bit of a break for which I apologize. I was moving my home and moving offices. The home move is complete now. The office move, might take another 5 or 6 weeks. I was thinking actually I might just record that whole process and maybe show you guys what I started with and where I've ended up. But anyway, so we've moved home. And it's really embarrassing, but we still apparently have areas in the UK where there's no Wi-Fi, no mobile connection, no services at all. It's very embarrassing. So that took me another 3 or 4 weeks to get all of that sorted out. So here we are now. The good thing is I've got some great guests lined up for upcoming episodes. So if you haven't yet subscribed, please go ahead and do so. Joining us today, we have Hamid Khalafallah. And I wanted to talk about the situation in Sudan, which is a topic that I've been wanting to discuss for some time now, but I was just waiting for the right guest that I can kind of reach out to. So I'm really excited to welcome Hamid. Hamid, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hamid, I think you're normally in Manchester. Where are you based today?
Yes, I'm normally based in Manchester, but I'm currently in Nairobi. My family lives in Nairobi or relocated to Nairobi after the war erupted. So that is my new home, I guess.
Oh, great. Okay, so Hamid, before we get started, would you mind telling us a bit about your background? You've done a PhD. What were your topics? What research have you done?
Sure. So I'm currently a PhD student in my final year at the University of Manchester. At the Global Development Institute, where I'm studying grassroots movements and political transitions. And my research kind of focuses on Sudan and how the grassroots movements in the Sudanese context contributed to shaping politics and shaping the democratization process that was underway before the war erupted.
So, are you originally from Sudan?
Yes, born and bred.
So when did you guys move out to Kenya?
1 month after the war started.
Must be
so that was May 2023.
Was it easy enough logistically getting out?
Of course it wasn't. So we used to live in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, where the fighting started when the war erupted until over 2 years ago. And it's in the center of the country. So we had to kind of start fleeing south. We moved first to a city called Medani, then we moved to another city called Gadarif, then to another city called Kassala, then to another city called Port Sudan. And finally from Port Sudan, we were able to catch a flight to Jeddah, and then from Jeddah to Cairo. A lot of people were forced to also go by road all the way up to Egypt through the north and so on. And that is a much more difficult trip. But because we had my elderly grandmother and so on, that was not an option for us. We had to wait until there were flights available. So, we went to Port Sudan and waited until there was a flight available to Jeddah and then to Cairo. And then after a few months in Cairo, I relocated to Manchester. My family moved to Kenya, where they're now settled. But logistics after you leave Sudan are not necessarily easy. Getting residency and permits and so on are very complicated and very difficult. But then you just remember how you are in a place of privilege, being out of Sudan and being out of the crossfire. So whatever logistics one might face here are incomparable to the people around the face.
So true. What about your property possessions, everything in Sudan? Are you able to kind of find out if everything's safe?
I think the short answer is I think we lost everything that we've possessed in terms of cars, belongings, everything inside our house. Our house, thankfully has not been hit or damaged severely by a bomb, drone, whatever. So it physically still stands, thankfully, but everything inside was looted and so on. But I honestly kind of stopped or I've never been keen on asking what's the situation there, or because some people have been able to kind of retrieve their cars from somewhere, or kind of people tell them, I saw your car in that city, and then they get in communication, try to get it back and so on. But personally, I've not been interested ever since I left Sudan in trying to find out what happened to my positions. I feel like it's in the grand scheme of things and in the grand scheme of loss and suffering that people are experienced and are still experiencing, it feels very insignificant to me. So yeah, I understand. I'm not very sure what I still have and what I still.
That's cool. And yeah, very wise word. Hamid, also at the start of the interview, I forgot to mention to you, if for some reason one of our connection breaks, just don't worry. Whoever gets kicked out will just rejoin and the session will go on. So
Okay.
just wanted to give you that little bit of. So, so tell me, what is the general situation in Sudan currently? Is the fighting going on?
It's going on, and unfortunately, it's only getting worse. And it's moving to new territories. The front lines keep on changing, and the more the front lines of the war change, the more suffering people kind of have to endure, because once there's fighting over a city or so on, the people inside the city or inside the town start to kind of learn how to navigate the new context and learn how to kind of establish new supply lines and how to kind of figure out ways of survival. But when that front line keeps on changing and shifting, it means that people have to renegotiate ways, have to relearn how to navigate these spaces and so on. So it makes the suffering a lot, bigger, and it makes it for people a lot harder to kind of keep up with what's happening and so on. In the past couple of weeks, we've seen the Rapid Support Forces, the paramilitary, take over Al Fashir, the capital of North Darfur. And as soon as that happened, there were reports of immense suffering. There were reports of, a lot of mass killing that was seen and documented through different reports from on the ground, but also through satellite imagery and so on. And in multiple parts of Sudan, famine has been declared. Stage 5 IPC in multiple parts of the countries. So yes, it's fighting is very much going, and the human suffering is very much increasing.
We'll talk about the background in a minute, how we got here, how this whole thing started. But currently, the way the situation is right now, so both sides, do they have grass levels of support? Who is supporting them within Sudan?
They don't have, support on the ground necessarily. I think a lot of the support that they have, or what they might perceive as support, is mostly, politics of survival, if you will. In order to survive wherever you are based in Sudan, you have to somehow figure out a way to work with the warring faction that is closer to you. But also, obviously, that does not, I'm not trying to kind of say that some of the warring factions or one or two of them might have a lot more genuine support, particularly the Sudanese army, because it's, in many ways, it's still the national army of the country, although myself and many others would disagree with everything that it has done ever since it was existed, and would personally would think it's still very much, the same colonial institution that the British left, and it was not reformed in order to help or serve the Sudanese nation in any way. But anyway, regardless of that, there is also some support to the army because it's the national institution. And there's also some support to the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary based on ethnic and tribal kind of allegiances.
Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Let me just take a moment to introduce our sponsors for today. This episode is kindly being sponsored by the Worldwide Listings Company Limited, or WLC for short. WLC is a complete A to Z Amazon account management service So if you're looking to start an e-commerce business, or you already have a business that you want to take to the next level, then get in touch and WLC will be able to help. Just for transparency purposes, let me also mention that WLC is a company that I personally created and am a director of. So when you get in touch with WLC, you will be speaking with directly myself or my team, and we very much look forward to speaking with you to see how we can serve your needs. Thank you. And with that said, let's get back to the episode. Yes, I want you to know that as well. So is there like an ethnic divide? Is there religious or sectarian kind of influence in all of this, or no?
There isn't a religious sectarian kind of divide. I think
That's good to know.
although some of the narratives that some of the Western actors are trying to portray about kind of suggest there's a religious divide. I don't think that is the case in any way. It's something that's borrowed from the war between Sudan and South Sudan ages ago, but that is not part of the dynamics that are unfolding at the moment. The divide is mostly ethnic, if you will. That is, there, particularly in the Darfur context, there are tribes that are of more Arab origin or background, and tribes that are of more African background. Although in these differences, particularly in the context of Darfur and in Sudan at large, are quite elusive in many ways, because all of these tribes are somewhat African in many ways. And Sudan is an African country at the end of the day, but there's still these kind of divides of tribes who identify as Arab because they have Arab blood in their lineage, and then others who identify as African, and there's that divide between these two. But there's also a center and like a gap between urban Sudan and rural Sudan, or between the center and the quote unquote peripheries. And although that divide, has very legitimate reasons, it's not why this war is being fought. However, the warring factions, particularly the Rapid Support Forces, have been trying to use that logic and that narrative to justifying the war that they're fighting.
Yeah. So, RSF, I heard that when it got started, there was a lot of like Arab fighters in it. We used to hear, I think there was a civil war in 2011 maybe, where we used to hear the name of Janjaweed fighters a lot. Is that still a factor in this civil war?
So the civil war was in 2003, and then it continued for almost 2 decades. And it was, the regime at the time, the regime of Umar al-Bashir, and the current military as well, they created the Rapid Support Forces. At the time, they were called the Janjaweed, and it was mostly formed of Arab Darfuri tribes who are known to be fighters and who are known to have, these skills, these warfare skills and so on. So they were recruited by al-Bashir and trained and paid particularly to do the dirty work on behalf of the military, so that the atrocities that the regime is committing in Darfur against the Darfuri people would not be on the military, but would be on the Janjaweed. And Himeti was on top of these Janjaweed.
So, Hamid, these Arab fighters, were they like coming from outside, from Libya or somewhere else, or were they actually Sudanese with like an Arab ethnic
these are Sudanese tribes. Yes.
Okay.
It's Sudanese Arab Darfuri tribes.
Sure. So yeah, so tell me a bit about, so apparently this is kind of like a knock-on effect from President Bashir's days when there was the RSF force created. So tell me a little bit about that background. After the force being created, at the start, these two forces were working together, no? And then how have we ended up here where we are now?
So the tensions kind of started when al-Bashir brought the RSF, started legitimizing the RSF and institutionalizing them. They were even mentioned in the constitution as a paramilitary, if you will, that is still under the army control, or at some point it was under direct Bashir control, then we'll set under army control. But anyway, we knew that they operated as an independent military all through. But Bashir legitimized them, institutionalized them. He brought them into Khartoum because he felt that there were some frustrations with him within the army. And to kind of balance it and kind of protect himself, he brought the Rapid Support Forces into Khartoum to protect him, essentially. Obviously, that did not work out well for him. He was toppled in 2023, in 2019 in April. And then there was a partnership between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces, the military, in kind of managing the transitional period after the revolution. But that was in many ways a marriage of convenience. It was not genuine anyway, but it was also because they knew that as military actors, they have to unite so that they could get rid of the civilian actors that were leading the revolution. And collectively, they kind of got rid of the civilian. They orchestrated a coup in 2021, and it became a fully, it was a full military rule ever since then. But then you have two militaries with two leaders, but one government and one president. So who rules? That contributed to the eruption of the wars.
So when al-Bashir was toppled, his government, did SAF take over the government, or is there a separate government in Sudan? Is it like a military government at the moment?
Yeah, after Bashir was toppled, there was a power sharing agreement between the military and the civilian actors, whereby the civilian actors were supposed to be in charge of the executive government. And then the military and some civilians shared what was called the Sovereignty Council, which was meant to stand in the place of the president. So it was a council that represents the president of the country in many ways. And then in 2021, the military toppled ousted essentially the civilian component of the government, and it became a fully military government. And that very illegitimate, unconstitutional post-coup military government is the one that SAF is using at the moment to govern as a de facto government.
I mean, as it always happens in these kind of situations, outside forces always start interfering, getting involved, and then it becomes kind of a regional conflict. Tell me, but I think something like that's taken place in Sudan. And in your view, have outsiders come in because of the situation that they found, or do you think the situation has been created more or less by outside interference? Is it a local grievance that's now spread outside, or is it coming from outside inwards?
I mean, it's a bit of both. There are very local, reasons for why the war in Sudan is happening. And there are very legitimate, actually, issues that, kind of suggested that a rupture in Sudan is kind of almost inevitable. The levels of inequality, the levels of marginalization of specific communities, the hyper-centralization of governance and uneven development that followed Sudan's post-colonial kind of era, kind of meant that, there has to be a rupture in some way or another. And then obviously the militarization of Sudan that was started by al-Bashir and then continued by SAF after the revolution and so on, and the empowerment of the Rapid Support Forces meant that, the only way for this rupture to happen was very unfortunately through a violent way. And this is what has happening. But then you had regional actors who have been monitoring all of this and trying to find ways to kind of manipulate the context and capitalize whatever they're able to capitalize to their own benefit. Yes, so these regional actors kind of knew what was happening, and they were studying it and monitoring it and making sure that they make use of every opportunity where they can get in the country and intervene because of these local dynamics and make use of it for their own gain and so on. And this is why now you see a very strong intervention by regional actors that kind of sometimes make the local dynamics even, very dismissible. It becomes not part of what is happening because of how heavily they're intervening.
Yes, it makes it even more difficult for any kind of negotiated settlement coming in from Sudan. So who are the regional players and who are they backing? Who's behind RSF and who's behind SAF?
I mean, the list is very long, but with the RSF, you have the direct supporter as the United Arab Emirates, UAE, uh, who are almost their patron. And then they get some support from uh, Russia through the Wagner Group. They also get some support from some branches of the Israeli government and so on. And then you have and then they also have support from one part of Libya through Haftar. They also have some regional support, sometimes from South Sudan, sometimes from Ethiopia, sometimes from Kenya. They kind of have different kind of alliances, but their main backer is the United Arab Emirates. Then, as for South, their main backer and strategic partner has always been Egypt, and the Egyptian army and the Sudanese army have this very strategic, long-standing partnership or relationship, if you will. But they also get support from other places like Qatar, like Turkey, a bit from Saudi, a bit from Russia, a bit from uh, other countries that they've been Iran as well. So the list is long, but if you want the main backers for the rapid support forces, I would say the UAE, and for the Sudanese army, I would say.
Yes, Russia seems to be on both sides a little bit, which is interesting. And also, there was news about UK, British involvement alongside UAE. Is UK still involved or have they backed off?
So there have been reports of UK manufactured weapons making their way to the rapid support forces hands. And obviously, we know that would have had to go through the UAE because the UK sells weapons to the UAE. But I think that is only one part of or one side of how the UK, but also other Western governments are kind of complicit. I think that the way they are involved is because they have been part of the post-revolution dynamics. In many ways, they have architectured the post-revolution dynamics. They have imposed specific kind of conditions on Sudan because they were always worried about a fully civilian transition in Sudan because of the uncertainty and the risks that come with it, and because they only see Sudan through the security and stability kind of through the stability and security aspect, they insisted on having the military as kind of a partner in the transition and so on. So they have very much contributed to the dynamics that led to the war. And ever since the war erupted, Western governments, including the UK, have persistently refused to hold their allies and strategic partners who are supporting and fueling the war in Sudan. They have refused to hold them accountable. And this is how they are, complicit, in my opinion, even more so than by providing direct arms to these allies.
Yeah. So where do you see all of this going? Eventually, do you think there will be some kind of a settlement? There is some third party that can bring the two sides together, or do you think we're looking at another breakup of Sudan?
I mean, one hopes, right, that there would be a settlement soon. And I think there are actors who are able to bring the warring factions to the table, namely the United States, because the United States, has leverage and has influence over the UAE and Egypt, the main backers of the warring factions. So by proxy, they have leverage over the warring factions and are able to bring them to the table and force them essentially to agree to a ceasefire deal. However, if they manage to force them to agree to a ceasefire deal, I don't think that would bring peace in Sudan in any way. Peace in Sudan would require a very, a comprehensive process that is led by Sudanese civilians, where the root causes of the war are addressed and are discussed, and the role of the military is, discussed in a very genuine way. And I think that is a process that the current U.S. administration is unable and unwilling to kind of facilitate in any way. So that kind of worries me about, what are we going to get with a process that is broken and with very little interest from the international community other than the U.S. to support, a genuine peace process and a genuine political process that would have the best interest of the Sudanese people at heart. So I think what we are going to get mostly is, the same approach that we're seeing today continues, is a broken ceasefire agreement that is not going to hold, and that might only freeze the conflict in some way. So it will be negative peace rather than positive peace, which we have also seen, in the region, essentially in Libya, in Ethiopia, in South Sudan, in many other countries, the region. And I don't think that helps anyone in any way. But unless there is a change of this approach, I don't think we're going to see genuine peace in Sudan.
I think you're so right. There's so many conflicts around the world where we talk about a peace settlement, but in reality, all it is a ceasefire, and then it's just waiting for the next ignition, and then it all kicks off again. So, yeah, we can hope that that's not going to be the case in Sudan. Also, I've heard Sudan is very rich in gold mines and produces quite a lot of gold. And I think a lot of that is now coming under the areas that are controlled by RSF. Is that their kind of major source of funding their war now?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they have very strategically or even before the war erupted, they made sure that they seized a lot of these gold mines and had control over. And throughout the war, they have been, smuggling Sudan's gold left and right and so on. And that is the main interest for why the UAE backs the rapid support forces. It's because of the Sudan's gold and because of the access they have over Sudan's gold, getting it for very cheap prices, and then reselling it in Dubai as using the international prices and making a lot of revenue out of it.
Oh wow! Is there a campaign going on about this where people can highlight some of the jewelry that's coming out of Sudanese gold?
So honestly, I'm not an expert in this, but what I understand is that what the UAE has been doing is that once they get Sudan's gold smuggled into the UAE and so on, it would get melted and mixed with other types of gold that's coming from otherwhere and get sold as not necessarily Sudanese gold. So it's hard to detect it. This is what henceforth once it reaches the UAE and it gets sold over and over. But however, I think it's still worth having sanctions over Sudan's gold. Sudan's gold is still not sanctioned, and even though the UAE, like I said, they try to go through this process of melting it and making sure that it's not able to, it's not able to be, it's not easy to be recognized and so on. It's still, even if they sell it in its original Sudan stamp kind of gold, it's still not sanctioned. So yeah, that is a very important.
Yeah, I think there should be something like that. There was a big campaign against like blood diamonds and all of these things. And Sudan's one of the, I think, one of the largest gold producing nations in the world. And how all of that resource is turned against the country of Sudan and the people of Sudan and is being manipulated and used by outside forces is tragic. Um, is there any kind of, what's the involvement of South Sudan? Is South Sudan completely out of this situation, or do they have any kind of um, dog in the fight, as they say?
I mean, South Sudan is in a bit of an awkward position because they have ties with both actors, with the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces. And that kind of puts them in a very awkward situation where sometimes they have to uh, be friends with this warring faction, sometimes they have to be friends with the other warring faction. But also, I think because of the borders, uh, some of the support that goes to the Rapid Support Forces in particular sometimes comes through South Sudan. And that sometimes they try to resist kind of having it go through them. So I don't think they have very strong commitment to either of the warring factions, but because of the history, because of geography, because of geopolitics, they find themselves in a situation or in a position of sometimes having to support this warring faction or the other.
Is there any kind of news on like the number of lives lost since this war started?
I mean, not really, honestly. At some point, there were estimates of 200,000 people being killed. I think that is a very kind of that's an underestimate indeed, very conservative estimation. Over the past few weeks, like I said, we had the events, the mass atrocities in Al Fashib. Uh, I'm sure that has taken the lives of tens of thousands of people, unfortunately. The estimates were 3,000, but I doubt that is the case. Uh, so yes, honestly, the only thing that we know that it's in hundreds of thousands, but it's very difficult to tell.
So tragic. It is so tragic. It's so tragic anywhere in the world. But Sudanese people are just amazing. They're so lovely. Whenever I meet people from Sudan, I just think that they always seem so content and so happy and so at peace with themselves. And I can only pray that they actually get that peace that they deserve. Um, so, in closing, is there any other information that you'd like to share with us? How is civil society um, existing within Sudan, within this kind of a situation? How are people managing their daily lives?
I mean, yes, civil society has been trying to play different roles, but as you'd imagine, the first thing that the war kind of targeted was civic spaces and the ability for civil society to exist. So that has been uh, eliminated to a great extent, but still civil society groups continue to play important roles. I think uh, I'm the most important role that I would say is how they have been shouldering the humanitarian response on the ground when all international actors have left the country and didn't provide much. So you have groups, grassroots groups like the emergency response rooms who were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize twice and won multiple other international awards for, being the only groups on the ground that are providing humanitarian assistance through different mutual aid initiatives to the people who are still caught in the crossfire. And also, aside to that, there are also different civil society groups that are trying to organize and trying to kind of produce a lot of proposals for their ending the war and so on. So I think, yes, many civilians and civilian actors have been doing a lot despite fragmentation, despite polarization, despite persistent targeting by warring factions and so on. Uh, but I think what is really missing is an international solidarity campaign, the same like what we have seen with Gaza over the past couple of years. I think people still try to view the war in Sudan as a civil war that is, that concerns only Sudanese people. But I am sure no matter what country you tell me, you name, I will
Yeah.
tell you in one way or another how that country is involved and complicit in what's happening in Sudan. The war in Sudan is very much an international war, and it deserves an international solidarity campaign.
Very good. But if someone wanted to follow further what's going on in Sudan, what would you recommend would be the best source of news?
So I think this is also part of why people have been shy in their solidarity, because, for instance, if you compare it with Gaza, there's reporting happening every day. You see videos, you see photos, and so on. But most parts of Sudan have been living in a telecom blackout for the past 2 years or so, where you don't get videos or photos coming outside, except for some few individuals who try and get these images out through, satellite internet and so on and so forth. But there are so what I would suggest, following the different Sudanese bloggers on X, on Instagram, that people can follow. There's a Sudanese blogger and reporter called Sarah Al Hassan on all of these platforms. She is amazing. She's been collecting information from all over the country, and she pushes information out every day. There are also a lot of Sudanese journalists who work for different, media channels, like Yusra Al-Bakr, who works for Sky News and tries to go and provide context from inside Sudan. There is Al-Miqdad, who works for Al-Arabiya Al-Hadath. So there are a number of Sudanese journalists that have been trying to fill in this media and coverage gap that people can follow.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll try and include some of those links into the show notes. If anyone is interested, they can follow from there. Hamid, also, if someone wanted to follow your work, do you have any social media presence or a blog, or how can they follow what you do?
Yeah, I'm on X, on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn. If you look up Hamid Khalafallah.
Sure. Again, do please share some links with me, and I'll put those in the show notes as well. Hamid, thank you so much for joining us today. I wish you, your family, and your country people all the best, and may they all see safety and security that they've been lacking for so many years. Because I think there's so much potential in Sudan. If we can just have a period of stability, I think there's so much talent, but there's also so much resources that could be used for the development of the country. So let's hope that we can get some stability soon.
Thank you so much, Safim.
Thank you, Hamid. Take care and speak to you again soon.
Thanks. Bye.